95% of fantasy players are making the exact same draft mistakes. Here are the 14 rules that will separate the championship teams, the contenders, from the pretenders. Watch until the end so that you can ensure that you walk away from your draft with cheers instead of tears.
Step on the court where the legends are made. Fantasy dreams where the stats get paid. Barack Lesnar throne, yeah, the hoops parade. Unicorn hunting, every move well played.
Before we get started, do me a favor and smash that like button for me and subscribe to Barack Lesnar Hoops if you have not yet. Please click that little bell notification down there so you can be alerted when these videos drop. So, like I said earlier, these tips I'm about to share with you, I'm trying to frame your mindset correctly so that when you go into your draft, you put together the strongest team possible. These rules I've tested over years. I've been doing this 15 plus years. I've been a diamond tier player now 11 plus years, and I'm going for 12. And I plan to continue being a diamond tier player because these rules have not changed. Even though the NBA has changed in the time I've started playing fantasy basketball, I keep having success because these rules are universal and continue to work. Rule number 1, queue your targets early. So before your draft has even started, you need to get into your draft room and add all of your potential targets to the queue. This is going to be your cheat sheet during crunch time. When you're on the clock, you don't want to be scrambling through hundreds of names to figure out who you want to draft. This is how you end up picking up players that you'll regret picking up. This is how you do desperation picks. This is how you build a team that isn't cohesive. And if you do not draft correctly, it can be very difficult to overcome. Rule number 2, and definitely don't do this, do not draft without knowing your league settings. Is it a points league? Is it a category league? How many roster spots do you have? What are the positions? Okay. What are the categories, if it is a categories league, that your league settings has? Because if you're splitting rebounds, some leagues might have offensive rebounds, defensive rebounds, and total rebounds. So in a league where there's 3 rebounding categories, all of a sudden big men are really valuable and the rules change a little bit. If it's traditional 9 category, maybe they got rid of turnovers and made it assist to turnover ratio, which again changes the dynamic of where you're picking players. So make sure that you know your settings. That one is crucial. So something I like to do is rule number 3. I use the projected rankings on Yahoo because the projected rankings are normally based on your league settings. So it gives you a real-time view of how cohesive your team build is. Like if you're crushing rebounds, but you're dying on assists, this can help you figure out what players to target. And it can also help you identify sleepers because maybe their at draft position is lower than their projected rank. I often find some really valuable players by going to projected rank or even going to last season and seeing what their last season rank was. And again, it should be doing it based on those league settings. It can help you identify the strongest players for that league setting. And if you stack a bunch of those really strong players, normally the cohesion of your team ends up making you very hard to beat. This is really related to what we talked about with the queue in rule number 1, but you want to get into that draft 30 minutes early. 30 minutes before the draft is typically when you find out where you will be in the draft order, because where you are in the draft order will determine a lot. It determines who's available to you, and your first 2 picks should inform your punt strategy. So once you know your draft position, get in that room, map out what your draft could look like. So let's say I'm picking at number 10. I identify 3 players that I can pick with my 10th pick. Then I can map out, all right, I pick again, since it's a snake draft, so I'm going to pick these 2 players. Now I know with these 2 players, hey, here are my punt categories. And now that I know my punt categories, I can go, let me look at the 3rd round and let me pick 4 more players that I want to target that fit my build, fit the punt that I have. I'm probably going to target a big man or I'm going to target a point guard because I overvalue those players and I try to load up on them before pick 100. So by mapping out what the draft could look like for you every step of the way, it allows you to make better informed decisions. It allows you to avoid mistakes that can cost you dearly all season long. Removing indecision is one of the most important things that you can do. Indecision eats away at time. Questioning yourself in the middle of the draft is how you end up, again, with an average, mediocre team that isn't good enough to be competitive. We've all been in this situation. We're in the middle of the draft. We see a guy we really want, but then we think to ourselves,
hey, let me pick this other guy instead. And with my next pick, I'll grab the guy I want and I'll get the best of both.
You know how crucial of a mistake that has been time and time again for you, because I know it has been for me, until I finally realized one day, if I really want a guy, I'm going to grab him when he's available to me. Now, I'm not telling you to reach 4 to 5 rounds, but if all you're trying to save is a round and like, oh, next round I'll pick him, just pick him then. You're going to regret not having that guy. And if you're really thinking that to yourself, oh, I can get him, that means you really want him. And the guy you're grabbing is probably something that you're trying to sneak in as a bonus. Focus on the guy you really want. Don't live all season regretting not making the move you really wanted to make. That one is crucial. And I know it applies to a lot of us. If it applies to you, do me a favor, leave me a comment and tell me a situation that happened to you. The right way to think about the draft is I want you to consider these guys as assets, not just players, okay? What that means is that as assets, you are accumulating the strongest assets that you can during the draft. This is your best opportunity to get the best assets because once they're on your team, you could take them off the board for the rest of the season. Yes, you'll probably be able to pick up some quality assets off of the waiver wire, but by not screwing up your draft, you are essentially building the foundation for the rest of the season. And if you build an incredibly strong foundation and a core of players that you will have for the remainder of the season, that's when you become really hard to beat, especially, again, if they're cohesive, if you're punting, if you're aligning your strengths, you're aligning your weaknesses, you're thinking, removing the noise, targeting players that fit your build, ignoring players that don't. All of this, considering these players as assets, is also thinking to yourself, what trade value can I get for this player throughout the season? Because again, they are an asset. Is this an asset that is going to appreciate, which means it goes up in value? Or is this an asset that I could see depreciating, which means going down in value? And the more players you draft that appreciate in value, that's what sleepers are. You grab them low, but they have the potential to be worth more than where you're picking them. And there are players that are not sleepers. They just give you the value of where you're picking them. If I draft a player at 25 and he produces at a top 25 level, he produces at 25, 26, then he gave me fair value for his draft position. So I like to load up on guys with the potential to beat their draft position. And all of this thinking is about thinking of these players as assets. I think once you make that change in your mind, fantasy basketball becomes a lot simpler. Number 7, this one's really important. You need to nail both your early and your late picks. What separates the elite from everybody else is the elite fantasy basketball players are nailing their late picks and landing early round talent correctly. They're making smart pickups with their first and second round pick. They are then building their team around those two players. And then at the very end of the draft, they're correctly identifying sleepers that are undervalued relative to where they're being drafted. Good job. So last year, as an example, I picked up Josh Hart really late in several leagues, and he ended up being an early round asset for the majority of the season. So by nailing my first few picks, but also bringing early round talent with my late picks, I was dominating the majority of the season. And if you look at the teams that have done well in your leagues and you go look at their draft, you'll often find that they nailed their sleeper picks. Their last 3 to 4 picks ended up producing at a top 100 level, and that's what put them over their top. Their number 4 pick performed at a number 4 pick level, and then their number 135 pick performed at a top 50 level. The moment you get several players that fall under that criteria, again, that is when your team becomes dominant and really difficult to defeat. Guys, in fantasy basketball, knowing who not to target is almost as important, if not more important, than knowing who to target. What I mean by that is, in category leagues, if I'm drafting someone like Giannis Antetokounmpo, right, and I decide, you know what, I'm going to punt free throw percentage, chances are I now know I'm going to target people with great free throw percentage. I'm sorry, with bad free throw percentage, because I'm probably going to punt free throw percentage to be good at. Now, let's say that I don't want to hurt my free throw percentage. And let's say I want a strong free throw percentage because it's part of my build. Now I know, hey, I'm not even going to draft Giannis. I'm not going to draft anyone that's going to hurt my free throw percentage. What that does is it removes mentally from your mind a ton of players that just don't fit your build. That's why punting is so important. Once you know what your build is, you eliminate so many options, which in turn means less indecision in the middle of your draft. All of a sudden, you're going down that list, and the only players that stick out to you are the players that fit your build. You have the stats right there on the Yahoo interface. You have their last year stats. You have their projected stats. If they're a younger player, you can be confident that there won't be too much variance in their production. If anything, their production might increase. Let's say it's a 23-year-old, he's going into his age 24 season. He still has the same playing time, the same role. It's safer to assume that player might see an uptick in that production, so you can kind of count on that. Versus a 37-year-old player that's maybe been on the downtrend for 2 to 3 seasons, you can kind of predict that their production might drop some from where it's at. So knowing who the players are, what their age is, what their role is, all of this leads to you being informed on who to target and who to not target. Removing noise is crucial. Clarity is power. Hey, in fantasy basketball, of course you want to grab all of the guys that are known. You want to grab the best names. You want to grab all the all-stars, all the all-NBA players. That's who you want to draft. Wrong. Okay, well, not entirely wrong, but fantasy basketball is different than real life basketball. By that, I mean the very best players in real life basketball may not necessarily be the very best players for fantasy basketball. And that's something that you have to keep in mind, because if you go into fantasy basketball with the mindset of, I'm only going to draft guys that are 90 rating or over on NBA 2K, or only guys that are all-stars, or only guys with big name recognition, or only guys with a Nike shoe deal. If you go in with that mentality and you're drafting off of name recognition versus actual production, you are going to draft some really terrible teams that are not cohesive and are going to be hurtful for you in the long run. In fantasy basketball, a role player can be more valuable to your team than an all NBA player. That's just a fact. Someone like Trey Murphy III might help your team more than someone like Giannis Antetokounmpo. And in no world is Trey Murphy III better than Giannis Antetokounmpo. But for your fantasy basketball team, again, if I have a build where I'm trying to protect my free throw percentage and I draft Giannis, that could hurt my team because it's not a cohesive build. There are even better examples of what I'm talking about. Someone like Josh Hart, who was a role player essentially for the Knicks, outproduced a lot of star players in the NBA. Guys like OG Anunoby, guys like Mikal Bridges. I'm naming a lot of Knicks players, but the point is, a lot of quality fantasy assets are guys that don't have name recognition, but they are incredible fantasy assets. I even made a video recently, a YouTube short, about a player that was one of the top drafted players when I started fantasy basketball, and Sean Marion. And Sean Marion was never considered a top 5 NBA player. He was great, but he was not that level of player. But in fantasy basketball, every season, he was going 1 or 2, because fantasy basketball success is not necessarily real life success. Often there's strong correlation, but not always. Do this. When you're on Yahoo, learn the interface, man. There are some things that you can do with the interface that help you filter and identify players that could be strong for you. So one of the things I like to do, I like to sort by rank. So I'll click right there when I'm drafting, I'll click on rank, and then it will show me who it's projecting to be ranked the highest of all the players remaining in my draft. If it's a guy that's projected, has an ADP of, let's say, 90, but his rank is showing me he's projected to be a rank of 40, that could be an indicator to me, hey, this guy has big sleeper potential, because based on these league settings, he fits really well. And now when you stack up a few of those players, again, that's when you nail your sleepers. That's when you build a team that's really hard to beat. And also, it helps you identify players that maybe you don't want to draft and you don't want to target. Clarity of mind, figuring out who you do not want on your team. So play around with these filters. A lot of people I know just go in the draft, scroll down through the players, pick who they want, and don't even consider these filtering options, which again can really be a screener to help you figure out the best players for your specific team. I think it's very important that you do this, but if they're rookies, you won't be able to do this. But review last season's production. Past success is a solid indicator of future success, especially with younger developing players. So don't just count on projections. Projections are made up. They can be accurate, but again, they're just projections. I like to use hard data. What happened? What have you done for me lately? I'm going to look at last season. And if they were injured and didn't really produce last season, that's something that you want to consider when you're drafting anyways. Go off of last season's production and then think to yourself, has their role changed? Are they in a better role now? Are they in a worse role? Using these sort of mental exercises, asking yourself these questions, is again how you end up making solid decisions. So when it's your time to pick, you're not panicking. You can make your pick in the first 15 seconds and everyone else in your league is happy because you're not delaying the draft. You don't want to be the guy waiting till the last second and then making a panic pickup. I suggest to everyone to do this in their draft if they can. Corner the center and point guard markets, okay? That means your first few picks are going to have to be point guards and centers, but the drop off on point guards and centers after pick 100 is significant. You can still find decent ones, but there tends to be holes in their game that make it hard to fit them seamlessly into your build. Versus in the top 100 picks is when you find the unicorns, or you find those big men that can get you blocks and a good free throw percentage. Again, there are a few sleepers late that have that sort of potential, but the safe picks are in that top 100 picks. And I like to leave my draft with at least 4 quality center players and 4 quality point guard eligible players, sometimes 5 of each. And in a default setting with like 12 to 13 players, I'll have maybe 3 forwards, 3 small forwards, or 3 power forward eligible players. But I also target players with multi-position eligibility, because if they have point guard, shooting guard, small forward eligibility, it just helps your team out so much, and it prevents you from having glaring holes that you spend all season trying to recover from. If you can go in with a very solid build, and I find the most solid builds I have for rotational flexibility is targeting 4 to 5 point guards and 4 to 5 centers of high caliber. While the draft is really crucial, it is not everything. Again, it's your opportunity to gather the strongest assets possible, but don't treat it like it's the end all be all. If you want to win your season, you have to stay on the waiver wire, and you have to cut dead weight when you have to cut dead weight. And sometimes you might have to make some trades in order to reach the full potential your team can have. And if you corner the market, let's say on point guards or centers, and you target players that are low on point guards and centers, now they're an injury away from having a huge deficit. This is when you can target those guys and say, hey, I'll give you my 5th best center, but I need this really strong forward. You make that trade, and now you just grabbed a guy that's more valuable than the player you drafted. But to them, it was a win-win because they needed that big man, because they risked not being able to play somebody in that big man slot, and now they're losing production on the bench because their build wasn't cohesive and they didn't have roster flexibility. So it's a two-pronged approach in protecting your own team from not having roster flexibility, but you also want to exploit teams that lack roster flexibility and offer them that flexibility in exchange for value in the trade. And this last rule has more to do with after the draft. And it's something that we'll discuss at length once the season starts. But after your draft, you have your assets from your draft, but now you want to identify strong sleepers that have the potential of being quality contributors on your team for the majority of the season. This method is crucial, not only for streaming, but for gathering more assets on your team, because gathering more assets allows you to then make 2-for-1 trades where you trade 2 really good players, bring 1 better player back, and then you go on the waiver wire to replace the guy that you gave up. If you do this successfully a few times, you can build a stacked team that's impossible to beat without a lot of injuries and bad luck on your side. One of the things I do after the season is I track waiver wire trends, and I pay for Yahoo Premium, so I get to see diamond tier waiver wire trends, which shows me on a daily basis which players are being picked up. So let's say it's the morning after a night full of games, and then I look and it shows that a player has been picked up 4,000 times in the last 12 hours. That lets me know he either had an amazing game off of the waiver wire, or maybe the guy ahead of him on the rotation just got a very serious injury, and now a bunch of people went to pick that player up. There are smaller trends you can identify. Sometimes it's just 200 to 300 people that have picked up a guy, but I like to track diamond tier trends because these tend to be the most successful fantasy basketball players, so you can kind of track their decision making. And if I see a guy's getting a lot of attention on the waiver wire all of a sudden, then I look a little further to get the context as to why maybe these pickups are happening. What's likely happening is the very best fantasy basketball players are projecting these guys to have season-long value, and then you can pick them up and try them for a few days, and maybe they drop off and you drop them back to the waiver wire, or maybe you stumble on gold that now has season-long value for your team. So after your draft, use waiver wire trends to identify players that can help you win your entire season. Guys, I truly believe that if you apply these rules I just shared with you, you're gonna dominate your league. This is how you separate yourself from the competition. If you enjoyed this video, please do me a favor, subscribe, click that bell notification, smash that like button for me. Most importantly, consider purchasing my draft guides right here. You see, I worked very hard on it just for you. It's only $9.99. It helps support the work that I'm doing here, but also it is a resource you can take into the draft with you, and again, help eliminate that noise, give you clarity, help you figure out what your punt build is. It has at draft positions so that you know where players are going. It gives you a breakdown of the fantasy basketball playoff schedule for all of these players. So again, when you need these players most, they are available to you during the fantasy basketball playoffs. And by thinking ahead to April or March of next year, even though it's October now, this is how you become a diamond tier player. If that is your goal, to become a diamond tier player, do me a favor, leave me a comment below. And if you did become a diamond tier player already listening to my advice, let me know below. Thank you so much for watching. Until next time, this is Barack Lesnar of Barack Lesnar Hoops. See you.